Have you ever wondered what really caused the deadliest conflict in human history? We often hear about the invasion of Poland, but the roots of World War II run much deeper, tangled in the aftermath of another great war, economic collapse, and the rise of dangerous ideologies. It wasn't just one event, but a cascade of failures and aggressions that plunged the world into darkness. Let's rewind to 1919. World War I, the war to end all wars, had just finished. The victors gathered at the Palace of Versailles in France to decide the fate of the defeated nations, primarily Germany. The result was the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty wasn't about reconciliation. It was about punishment. Germany was forced to accept full blame for the war, a clause known as the War Guilt Clause. It had to pay crippling reparations, astronomical sums of money to the Allied powers. Its military was severely restricted. Its overseas colonies were taken away, and significant chunks of its territory were handed over to neighboring countries. Imagine being a German citizen at that time. You've just endured a devastating war, and now your nation is being humiliated on the world stage. The economic burden was immense, leading to hyperinflation in the early 1920s. People's life savings became worthless overnight. This created a deep-seated resentment and a sense of injustice that festered for years. The treaty, intended to ensure peace, instead planted the seeds of future conflict by creating a perfect breeding ground for extremist teen nationalism. Then, just as Germany was beginning to stabilize, the world was hit by another catastrophe, the Great Depression. Starting with the Wall Street crash of 1929, a financial tsunami swept across the globe. Economies collapsed, banks failed, and unemployment skyrocketed. In Germany, which was heavily reliant on American loans to pay its reparations, the impact was catastrophic. By 1932, nearly 1 in 3 Germans was unemployed. People were desperate, hungry, and losing faith in their democratic government, the Weimar Republic, which seemed powerless to solve the crisis. This widespread desperation made people vulnerable to extremist voices promising simple solutions and a return to national glory. In Germany, this voice belonged to Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party. Hitler was a charismatic and powerful speaker who skillfully exploited the public's anger. He promised to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the military, restore Germany's lost territories, and put Germans back to work. He provided a scapegoat for all of Germany's problems: Jewish people, communists, and the democratic leaders who had signed the treaty. In 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor, and within a year, he had dismantled democracy and established a brutal dictatorship. But Germany wasn't alone. The economic turmoil of the Great Depression fueled the rise of aggressive, militaristic dictatorships in other parts of the world as well. In Italy, Benito Mussolini and his fascist party had already seized power in the 1920s, dreaming of restoring the glory of the Roman Empire. He promoted a cult of personality and crushed all political opposition. In Japan, the military gained increasing control over the government. Believing Japan was destined to dominate East Asia, they pursued an aggressive expansionist policy to secure vital natural resources like oil and rubber, which the island nation lacked. These 3 nations, Germany, Italy, and Japan, would eventually form the Axis powers, united by their rejection of international cooperation and their belief in military conquest. Faced with these rising threats, how did the world's democracies, like Britain and France, respond? With a policy of appeasement. Haunted by the memory of World War I and dealing with their own economic problems, these nations were desperate to avoid another war. They believed that if they gave in to some of Hitler's demands, he would eventually be satisfied and peace could be maintained. So, when Hitler began to openly defy the Treaty of Versailles, they did little. In 1935, he reintroduced military conscription. In 1936, he sent troops into the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone. The world watched, but did nothing. Then, in 1938, he annexed Austria in the Anschluss. Later that year, he demanded the Sudetenland, a German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia. At the Munich conference, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French leaders agreed to give Hitler the Sudetenland, without consulting the Czechs. Chamberlain returned to Britain famously declaring he had secured peace for our time. But he was wrong. Appeasement didn't satisfy Hitler. It emboldened him. It sent a clear message that the Western democracies lacked the will to stand up to him. He saw it as a sign of weakness and became convinced he could continue his aggression without facing serious opposition. The final straw came on September 1, 1939. Having already broken his Munich promise by invading the rest of Czechoslovakia, Hitler turned his eyes to Poland. He demanded the return of the port city of Danzig and access across the Polish corridor. When Poland refused, Germany invaded. This was the immediate trigger for the war in Europe. Britain and France had pledged to defend Poland. They issued an ultimatum to Germany: withdraw your troops or face war. Hitler ignored it. On September 3, 1939, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and World War II in Europe began. Meanwhile, the other Axis powers were pursuing their own expansionist goals. Italy, under Mussolini, had invaded Ethiopia in 1935 and Albania in 1939, seeking to build a new Roman Empire around the Mediterranean. In Asia, Japan had been waging a brutal war of conquest against China since 1937. Their ambition was to create a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, which was essentially a Japanese empire. In 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan formalized their alliance with the Tripartite Pact, pledging to support each other. This created two clear, opposing global factions. The conflict that began in Europe and Asia was now truly becoming a world war. Beyond the land grabs and political failures, World War II was also a profound ideological conflict. On one side were the Axis powers, promoting fascism, Nazism, and militarism. These ideologies glorified the state, worshipped military power, and brutally suppressed individual freedoms. They were also deeply rooted in racial supremacy. The Nazis, in particular, believed in the superiority of an Aryan race, and sought to exterminate those they deemed inferior, especially Jewish people, leading to the unimaginable horror of the Holocaust. On the other side were the Allied powers, led by Britain, the Soviet Union after it was invaded by Germany, and later the United States. While they had their own deep political differences, capitalist democracies allied with a communist state, they were united in their opposition to Axis aggression. They fought for principles like democracy, freedom, and national sovereignty. It was a battle not just for territory, but for the very future of human civilization and the values that would define it. So you see, the Second World War wasn't caused by a single act but by a perfect storm of unresolved grievances, economic disaster, political cowardice, and poisonous ideology. The Treaty of Versailles created the anger, the Great Depression created the desperation, and dictators like Hitler rose to exploit both. The policy of appeasement allowed aggression to grow unchecked until, finally, the invasion of Poland lit the fuse. Understanding these complex causes is crucial. It reminds us how fragile peace can be and why we must always stand against tyranny and aggression. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history.